Regardless of the season, the time of the year, the snow on the ground, we talk Buckeyes with you each and every week here on the Voice of College Football, and we're happy to be joined by Steve Hellwagon right next to me, Bucknuts 247 Sports, and of course Kevin Noon. You can catch him at Buckeye Huddle, also the Big Me podcast. Guys, how we doing this week?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Before we get ramped up, just want to make sure everybody can find you guys. Kevin, the Big Me podcast, how many times is that being released these days?
I guess it really depends on how much I have to say right now. I've got one cooking for tomorrow. I did my way too early top 25 rankings, and have not had an opportunity to talk about it, but generally at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. It just really depends if I have anything to say. If I don't find it interesting, I just assume nobody else is going to find it interesting. So I need to be a little better about that.
I've been a little tardy on my way too early top 25. It's going to have to be switched to the just too early top 25, I guess. There's just so much that it seems like everybody expects right after the previous season ends that you're just boom. And I'm just a little tardy on that. I like to review 2022, but that's not the fans' mindset. It's over. Let's go 23. And I'm like, I want to re-rank everyone. I want to do this. I want to review. Nope. Tony's shaking his head. He knows exactly the game.
The numbers tell you what the people want. And no matter if you want to go back and look back a little bit, it's always about moving forward. That is why college football is better than everything else, because you're always moving forward. The team is always changing. There's always something better on the horizon. Ohio State will eventually have a better coach than this Ryan Day guy, better than Urban Meyer. Get these clowns out of here. Somebody better is coming along.
I'm the old stodgy guy that wants to look back, wants to review. Yeah, I know. I got to give people what they want when all I got to do is look at the views too. Speculation. There it is. Tony, what do you have working?
I was just sorry I was late. I was just throwing up a Hero Kanu story. Talked to him at the Peach Bowl and talked to Larry Johnson about him as well. And just that's one of the fun parts about the bowl games is you get to talk to all of the young guys that you don't get to talk to during the season. And then we write about them in January and February before spring ball starts. So that's what I was doing. Just Hero Kanu talking about still learning the game. Grew up playing soccer, and obviously 6'4", 305 pounds as a defensive tackle is an interesting combination of soccer and football. Not that Kevin thinks anything interesting about soccer can ever equate, and Mark, obviously. Me and Steve, we're agnostic. It's like it is what it is. We're not going to be anti-soccer, but just a young guy who's still learning the game and really enthusiastic about it, and everybody loves him, and so we wrote about that.
The best I could do one time to describe how soccer looks to me, one time we're at ESPN, we're going through everything. I even one time walked into a management meeting while the World Cup was going on, and of course we had to be full in on the World Cup. Fortunately, I worked nights, and most of it was during the day. I didn't have to deal with it too much, but I sat with my back facing the 80-inch screen we had of the World Cup just so I didn't have to watch it while we were meeting. But this is what I get out of soccer. This is kind of how it visually looks to me. Just kind of back and forth, guys running, chasing. Yeah,
I get their steps in.
Those guys are phenomenal athletes and all of that. I have respect for them. I just don't want to watch it.
Who does the fullback pass it to?
The halfback.
And who does the halfback pass it to?
The fullback.
And then the fullback passes it to the halfback, and it kind of goes on for about 90 minutes. Yeah.
I know this isn't a soccer show, but one of my favorite soccer stories to tell you my enthusiasm about soccer is when I was 5 or 6, I was in a soccer league, and we were in a championship game. And that day I was having, and I still remember, it's the best nap I've ever had in the recliner. And I didn't bother going to the championship game because I was just having such a good nap. And I was valuing my time having that nap. And so I did not get on my bike and go to the championship game.
Did your team win?
I don't know. Season was over after that point.
I went to one of those pre-qualifying Olympic soccer games at Gillette Stadium because we could sit in the press box. It was an ESP event, the whole deal. And it's free food. You can go hang out with people and have fun. But I'm sitting there. There was one of my best friends from work, and he said, I'm going to sell you on soccer, so you got to sit here and watch. I'm going to explain things to you. There was a goal scored in the first minute of the game, and all I knew to tell him was, this game's over, right? And he actually said, yeah, it probably is. And I said, that's all I need to know. All right, Steve, what you got going?
Oh, just working like a dog. Bucknuts.com, 24/7 sports, and following the foibles of this Ohio State basketball team, where the season is quickly circling the drain. They're 11-9 now, and clearly on the outside looking in at the NCAA tournament. So, going to need a big finish for them, and just gearing up, like Kevin said. Maybe said this off the air. We're going to get a chance to talk to at least a few, if not all, of the early enrolling freshmen next week. So that'll be kind of a cool day, I think, for us, and tide us over until we get started with spring football in early March. So that's a lot of what's going on right now.
Shout out to your cohort there, Pat Murphy. I was just reviewing his article on one Victor Cutler, of course, Louisiana Monroe guard, who transferred. I believe the commitment was made a week ago, but he officially transferred and got signed today, I believe. And just kind of reviewing his numbers and so forth, Steve, it appears as though he's not necessarily plug and play, but just another piece, another rotational guy. Never played a full season at Louisiana Monroe, never a 12 or 13 game stretch for him, but increasing number of snaps every year, good performance, solid performance against the Power 5 teams on the schedule, Alabama and Texas. And so this looks like a guy that's not necessarily going to star along the offensive line necessarily, but a good piece to have.
Yeah, Victor Cutler, he's in the 6'3", 305-pound range. And he started at tackle, at least part of this past season at Louisiana Monroe. 21, I believe, career starts for them over a couple of years. And he has got 2 years of eligibility left, including his COVID year from 21. So he's got a lot of upside there, or 20 or 21. All the years kind of run together now, but I guess 21 or 20. I don't know. I forget which year it was.
20
for football was the COVID year. So he's got played the last 2 years there at Louisiana Monroe, and now has 2 years remaining at Ohio State. And if he wants it, and I guess there's a lot of people projecting him to play an interior position, a guard or center even at Ohio State. Of course, Ohio State lost its center, Luke Whippler, early to the NFL. So it's an open audition this spring to have a new center for the Buckeyes. So perhaps Victor Cutler will fill that role. I watched the Alabama game. I went back and queued it up and watched it on YouTube. And I was very impressed with what Victor was able to do against Alabama. What I noticed was they did not have, even against Alabama's better defensive ends and outside linebackers who were rushing the quarterback. They did not typically have to have a running back, an H-back, a tight end on his side to help chip with the pass rusher. So I thought that was pretty good that they left him alone on an island for the most part, and he did pretty well. And then when they were down inside the red zone, they ran in behind him for a touchdown against Alabama. Of course, the score by that point was already 27-0. So you probably had a lot of the sophomores and freshmen mixing in already at that point on defense for Alabama in the second quarter. But still impressive drive blocker from what I could tell. And if that's what Justin Fry wants to do going forward with the blocking scheme for Ohio State running the football, as some people have said, then that'll be a good thing, I think, going forward, that he's a guy that can be part of that. So he's another body to throw into the competition this spring, a guy that's got more experience playing college football than just about anybody who will be in the line. The only guy with more starts, maybe Matthew Jones may not even have as many starts as Victor Cutler in his career, at least at the college level. So be interesting to see how that experience helps him make some inroads there at Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was my turn on there. I think Steve hit all the points. I haven't gone back and watched a lot of tape on him. Haven't had the opportunity. I know football season's over. I should have nothing but time, but just haven't gotten around to watching the tape on him. But I think that it is a big pickup because he is somebody that you could plug in there at center, and that would allow Matt Jones to stay at guard. And I think a lot of it is you convince Matt Jones to stay. Matt Jones comes to the decision to stay at Ohio State. What does he see himself playing potentially at the next level? And I think that right now, guard is something that he is more in tune with. So without having Victor Cutler there to potentially compete for that position, then where are you at? Are you at Jacob James, Toby Wilson? I think putting Vic Cutler in that mix is a big get. I mean, we talk so much about the versatility that Ohio State likes to have in its linemen, and I think Victor Cutler, just based on all the different levels that he's played on the line, is somebody that gives them that versatility. And then it's just a matter of trying to get your 5 best offensive linemen out there in whatever configuration it is. And we're not going to see a system like we did a couple years ago of 4 tackles and a center. They got away from that last year, and I think that there's going to be a lot of eyes on what Justin Fry's first rebuilt offensive line is going to look like coming into this Justin Fry era. And while Vic Cutler may not be the name that everybody was looking for when offensive line portal names came out there, you had the Wazoo guy, you had a couple other guys out there. I think that Victor Cutler certainly can come in and be as impactful as maybe even a Jonah Jackson by the time it's all said and done, even though Jonah Jackson was an all Big Ten performer at Rutgers, and Vic Cutler, if you look at his PFF grades, maybe not off the chart, but I also will debate that PFF grades can be a little odd at times. But get him in the mix and let's see what he's able to do.
Yeah, I think the plan is for him to start out at center, and he's not been an all Sun Belt Conference player by the media or the coaches, or I don't even know if he was honorable mention. And he realizes this, like he understands that this is an opportunity that he needs to take full advantage of, and Ohio State's going to give him that opportunity, but still got to win the job. I wrote about yesterday, I think I'm doing a series of replacing all the departed starters. So yesterday, I think I did the one on replacing Luke Whippler. And as Kevin threw out all the names in there, I didn't include Toby Wilson, even though he was almost a backup center in 2021 as a true freshman walk-on. It's just the last time a walk-on was on the offensive line and started and played a lot was like Mike Stafford in 2002. So I think some things would have to happen one way or another for that to be Toby Wilson, but also that's me covering my bases for not including him. So that's what I'm doing there. But Cutler, what I like about him is that he is athletic enough to play left tackle, and you want an athletic guy to play center because then you can do a bunch of different things with him in terms of pulling and just the amount of movement that is necessary. So that's good, but I mean, it's not ideal by any stretch, but the good news is he's here for spring, so it's not like you're just entering him in the mix in June like they did with Jonah Jackson. So you'll get a pretty good idea of they'll know whether they need to hit that portal again in May based on what they see this spring.
We've got Sue chiming in here. Appreciate you being here, Sue. And of course, thank you for the retweet on our Twitter post. Thank you for that. Any thoughts on Jaden Davis, Julian Sayin? So we're talking about 2 top 5 quarterbacks, 2 roughly top 25 players in the country. Salen from North Carolina, and Jaden Davis is a California student athlete. But any leans there? We've got a hard commit, of course, from Salen to Alabama as of November.
I guess I'll jump in there. We'll start with Julian Sayin, somebody that I don't know as much about. You certainly are going to offer guys that have that national caliber type of play. Has Alabama necessarily, outside of Bryce Young, had that just awesome playmaking type of quarterback. I mean, they've had some game managers along the way. They've had some guys that have been able to go out and make plays, but more so the game manager. I think the name that everybody's more familiar with is Jaden Davis out of the greater Charlotte area. If you look at how recruiting was going, the top 2 quarterbacks several months ago in the class were Dylan Raiola and Jaden Davis, and both were very high on Ohio State. And Ohio State obviously takes the commitment of Dylan Raiola. That falls apart. Jaden Davis looked like he was pretty close to committing to that team up north. That has slowed down a little bit. He's seen a co-offensive coordinator depart that program. He's saying, well, I don't feel any differently about Michigan than I did before, but Ohio State has gone into the school, has had conversations with the family of Jaden Davis, and is trying to get back in there. Now, it's way too premature to come in and say that Ohio State is firmly number 2 for them, or number 1 or number 4. But the fact that Ohio State has been able to get involved in that again is a good sign. I think that the fact that Dylan Raiola decommitted when he did rather than 6 months from now is very important for Ohio State, as well as they go in their pursuit of who is going to be the quarterback in that 24 class. When you sit there and you see a lot of the top names already committed to places, and you go after a DJ Lagway who's committed to Florida or somebody like that, or do you widen the net and look at an Aaron Noland or somebody like that? But I think that Ohio State certainly is in the ensemble in terms of recruiting Jaden Davis. I don't know who the lead is at this point, but the fact that it is January 26th as we do this show, and they have a long time to go, I'm not willing to count out Ohio State's chances, but it's not going to be something of where it just, we're just going to pick up where we left off. I mean, why did you take Dylan Raiola over Jaden Davis? Why did you not sit there and wait and see? I mean, there's a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered, and there's a lot of water that's going to have to pass under that bridge.
That to me is the part of it that would drive me crazy as a coach trying to recruit, or a position coach, is the whole game of, it's tough enough to get the top athletes in the country when you're expected to get the top athletes in the country. It's another thing, the whole time period between commitments, or when people expect commitments to come in, versus, how long you got to hold that commitment and keep him interested and keep him engaged and keep him away from everybody else. And on top of that, if you lose somebody, then boom, you got to turn your attention and play the game of, do we direct our resources this way or that way, and really having a good feel for where they stand, because you don't want to get burned. And that's the real tricky part to the recruiting game for me, is just trying to guess, where to put those resources and strategize in that way, and build relationships and not get burned and have a backup plan. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, they put everything into Raiola's basket, and then he turned his back on them in spectacular fashion. And I don't know what the backstory was about that, but he turns up apparently at the Peach Bowl wearing Georgia garb, and people don't know if it's going to be Georgia or Nebraska for him, or what it's going to be, but there was some kind of disconnect somewhere in the mix on him, and now they're trying to play catch up on other guys at that position in that class, and they're in a tough spot. They're in a tough bind. So I don't know. I guess we'll wait and see what they can unearth. I think they're going to be in good shape on 25. They've got a couple guys in Ohio that they're looking at, and then obviously some national guys as well for 25. So we'll see how that turns out.
I think one of the things Ryan Day has done well is get in on guys late, and one of the things maybe he's not done that well is land guys early. You look at the guys who have committed like early on, like a Jack Miller or a Dylan Raiola or a Quinn Ewers. Like at this point, Kyle McCord, you're hoping, is the outlier of that group as a guy who committed pretty early on, as opposed to the guys that he's gone and gotten late, like Justin Fields, like CJ Stroud, like Devin Brown, like Lincoln Keenholz at this point. So he's done a good job of making, something out of nothing, and some really good some things out of nothing. And now that you've got all of this time to put something together, it's hard to imagine Ohio State not being able to get a top flight quarterback in 2024, the way they continue to produce first round quarterbacks. I get NIL is a thing, and so are guys already finding their homes, but we also know commitments at this point don't mean all that much. And I mean, signing an NIL or signing a letter of intent and signing with a school only means so much anymore. So commitments mean nothing. And so there's still plenty of time to go get somebody. It's pretty fascinating to me that Alabama already has, they have signed 2 5-star guys in 2022, and they're going to add another in 2023. That's just, I don't know how that math works out. And obviously some of those guys are going to open back up on the market. And that's another area where Ohio State should be able to get somebody if they need to, if they're ever in that position. I just don't see Ryan Day being put in that position again. He was only in that position once. Now it's because of Urban Meyer's quarterback recruiting.
One of the weird things too, just to jump back in, is that I think Ohio State will benefit greatly if Devin Brown or Kyle McCord come out and start putting up just crazy numbers. But unfortunately, the way that the math works is season starts in September, and you're so far down the rabbit hole for 24 at that point that when Ohio State, if they are able to replicate, let's remember, we're only a couple years removed from Justin Fields is gone, and who's the right guy for them to put in there? And I'm not so sure if CJ Stroud is the right guy. And while he didn't win a Heisman, and we can go through all of the things of where he maybe came up a little bit short, there's no denying that in terms of accurate passing and just huge numbers and everything, he's going to be on the top page of record books for a long time for Ohio State. But if you sit there and you take another guy who is a 4-star or 5-star, depending if we're talking about McCord or Brown, and replicate it, and you're a quarterback who's looking to be developed, it's like, well, maybe Ohio State isn't such a bad opportunity. But once again, we're so far down the road. I mean, at this point, there has to still be, we've got this, we've got the data to show you that we develop quarterbacks here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, say the Ohio State coaches. But it would be nice to have, one more case study, whether it be Brown or McCord, to show, look, this isn't an outlier. This isn't we just, we caught lightning in a bottle with CJ Stroud. But to Tony's point, Ohio State should not be struggling right now being QBU in terms of what it's doing with its quarterbacks.
Well, and if Devin Brown ends up winning the job and lights it up, that might hurt 2024 recruiting because he'll be back in 2024. Kyle McCord lights it up, that might encourage somebody to jump over to Ohio State because the thought is that he will be entering the NFL draft, and then it's anybody's job. A true freshman could absolutely come in and win the job. Wink, wink.
Where goes one? Asking us, will Ohio State's class of 2024 be one of the largest Ohio-based player classes in a while? Hearing good things, good players coming out of Ohio.
All right, I'll go again. I guess I'm kind of our designated big picture recruiting guy. Yeah, 24 is shaping up to be a really solid year in the state of Ohio in terms of the talent that's produced. Ohio State is always going to get its top-end kids out of the state of Ohio. I think one of the differences that we see now in Ohio versus even just during the Jim Tressel era, which let's remember is not exactly yesterday. I mean, there's some time that has happened between those two things. Is it's not a matter of who 1 through 4 in the state of Ohio were. It was a matter of who 5 through 12 were. And as 5 through 12 maybe got a little bit lower and lower and lower of being the kids you need to be able to compete for national championships and things along those lines, Ohio State certainly had to cast a wider net. We're very quick to point out, well, Urban Meyer completely, changed the strategy. And yes, he did. But I think some of that was predicated on the fact that Ohio was not producing as much talent, and you had to go out of state to find certain positions. But you sit there and you look at 24, you look at cornerbacks like Aaron Scott, and you look at Bryce West, and you look at what's coming out of the state in terms of Glenville, as I mentioned, Bryce West has got guys again. You've got a lot more players that are are emerging at this point. I mean, Ohio State, just offered a 25 running back within the last 15 minutes with Marquise Davis. I mean, a 25. And we talk about how you have to be damn sure if you're going to offer an in-state kid that you better be ready to take them. And if they're already ready with this 25 kid, I'm not saying that there's going to suddenly be a renaissance in in-state recruiting, but to where goes one's question, I think that I think 24, we could see a higher concentration of state of Ohio kids just based on what is on the table. Because again, it's not a matter of drawing a number out there and saying we're going to take 14 kids from the state of Ohio, come hell or high water. There better be 14 kids to take if you're going to get there. In a lot of years, they're not.
Yeah, they, I think as of right now, have one commitment for 2024 from Ohio, Garrett Stover, who's an athlete prospect, a cousin of Cade Stover, I guess. And he's from Big Walnut, which is closer to central Ohio or just outside Columbus, as opposed to Cade Stover, who was from Lexington up closer to Mansfield, about halfway between here and Cleveland. Speaking of Cleveland, the number one player in the 24/7 database and number 27 overall nationally, number one in Ohio, is Bryce West, excuse me, cornerback from Cleveland Glenville. I'm fighting it. And Glenville, of course, is the school that sent about 20 guys to Ohio State from the early 2000s until the early 2010s or 20 teens there. And, Bryce could be the guy that reopens opens that back up in a big way. I think they did have a commitment from there this past year. But Jordan Marshall, running back from Cincinnati Moeller, Elias Rudolph, a defensive end from Taft, those down in Cincinnati, those seem to be the three top guys. Aaron Scott, a defensive back from Springfield. That's been a program that's won a ton of games and made the state championship game, and come out of Southwest Ohio, where people think about all those great Cincinnati schools like Coleraine, Moeller, even the Dayton schools like Wayne and Centerville and Elder and St. X and everything. Springfield has come out of that quadrant of the state and been in the state championship game now 2 years in a row. So Aaron Scott will be back there for his senior year, and he'll try and make it 3 years in a row. Those are the top four: Bryce West, Jordan Marshall, Elias Rudolph, Aaron Scott. To my knowledge, Ohio State's offered all four of them. And if they could get three of those four guys, I think that'd be a great backbone, I think, for this class. So sometimes you got to go back to your roots, I guess. And Ohio is definitely the backbone for Ohio State. We saw Ryan Day did it a little bit this past year. And some would even say maybe reached on a couple of guys from the great state of Ohio this past year in Jim Tressel form. So, maybe that's what it will take to help get this program over the hump and get them back on top in the Big Ten and win a national championship eventually. But maybe a few more Ohio guys to sprinkle in there. What Ohio really hasn't done for Ohio State is produce those difference-making linemen perhaps on both sides of the ball. I guess the defensive tackles, a lot of them are from Ohio, and Jack Sawyer, defensive end, is from Ohio. But, that Ohio could do a little bit better perhaps up front on that side of the ball. And Ohio State did offer a couple of guys down the line here, at least according to the 24/7 list, with Devontae Armstrong and his brother Deontay Armstrong from Lakewood St. Edward. They're both in the 6'7", 280, 290 mold. And those two guys, Lakewood St. Ed's, has obviously been a state championship caliber program as well. So last couple of years. So interesting to see that Ohio State's kind of taking note of the teams that have been going deep in the playoffs and starting to recruit those guys pretty heavily as well.
And the fact that there's two guys in state that they like at running back enough to offer at this point, I think, is a good sign as well. I think they signed 7 Ohioans in the 2023 class. I think maybe they can get to 8 or 9 if things go well, and maybe some guys also develop a little bit later on. So I think while we all agree that this is like a very deep class, surprised to look back and see how many Ohioans were in the last class. But I think they probably should top that one. I don't know if it'll be by more than 1 or 2 though.
I'm going to take 9 Routes comment here / question and kind of broaden it out to the Ohio State fan base and wherever they show up on whatever site. So in taking comments and questions from all fan bases here, I may have a little bit of a broader perspective possibly, but I think most fans have a very skewed, biased opinion of their fan base and their rivals' fan base in particular and other fan bases for obvious reasons. That's not a criticism. That's just human nature. And that's how people look at things, that either their fan base is on point, great, we know what we're talking about, we're knowledgeable, or, you know, our fan base is crazy, they're delusional. And really everybody's fan base to a large extent is delusional and crazy and so forth. And when the expectations, it's one thing to be a fan base and monitor the fan base at Purdue or Kansas State or West Virginia when they're churning out 7-5 seasons and what the expectations are. I think they seem to be more reasonable, of course, versus Ohio State fans who seem to, there's certainly a faction of them that go overboard. And we saw it leading into the Notre Dame opener where, okay, we're winning this game by 5 touchdowns. Let's move on. You know, we need to knock out 11 before Michigan and we're on our way kind of thing. And then when things don't go right, i.e., of course, Michigan, the Oregon game 2 years ago, then it's we're horrible, fire everyone. And then it's the other direction. So do you guys have any thoughts about the Ohio State fan base maybe possibly being a bit unique?
How long do you have?
All these fans are what make it possible for me to do my job. I love you all. I mean, you know, it would be very foolish for me to get out there and to get on too much of a heater here talking about this. But I will say that I think that message board culture, and I've been a big message board guy for a long time now, after I got out of quote unquote legitimate media here to the internet. There's just, you know, I can't control much of my life. The wife's on my case and the boss is a jerk and the dog crapped on the floor and everything else. So I'm going to, you know what rolls downhill? I'm going to get on a message board. I'm going to take it out on everybody because I'm not on here as John Q. Public. I'm on here as Buckeye fan 124 and nobody knows who the hell I am. So I could be as big of a, you know what, as I want to be. And there's no comeuppance that's going to happen there. I mean, and it's funny because I spent a lot of time working in a different network for more than a decade. And I would see people who would run out the life of a message board handle, would cancel and sign up under a new one so they could just start all over again. But, you know, I think sometimes there are guys that are just like, I'm going to show you how big of a non-homer I am, even though I'm a humongous homer. I'm going to be more critical than anybody, which obviously will shed all of my homer points, even though maybe I believe what I'm saying or maybe I don't. But on the flip side, sometimes having a couple of those voices in the room, while, you know, a couple bad apples may spoil the bushel, you also don't want a message board that's an echo chamber. You just don't want it to where it's groupthink and everybody agrees all the time, because that's boring and people are not signing up for that either. But anybody that wants to sign up for Buckeye Huddle, I'm here for it.
I just the one of the things that I don't like are the self-loathing fans, that because I have some Michigan fans who reach out to me and tell me, like, you're so right about Michigan. They're doing this wrong. They're doing this wrong. They're doing this wrong. And I was like, love your team. Enjoy your team. Don't use me as somebody that you're going to throw your Michigan anger on. Like, I can get that from Ohio State fans. I don't need it from Michigan fans as well. But there are some people who want to be right more than they want their team to be successful. And I think that's where you get some of it. But I'm with Kevin. I think the more voices, the better. And if that voice has, some money every month to put forward to a subscription site, even now, but it is better when there are multiple viewpoints. And the thing is that if people want to be wrong on the internet, there's going to be so many people there to tell them how wrong they are. It kind of polices itself that way. So, Mark, I will not use your exercise here to bash internet fans. I'm not going to do that. I'm appalled that you're trying to do it.
I'm merely reading the question and interpreting.
It's college football. It's college sports. Like, and then college, like Ohio State fans are not unique. College sports fans are not unique. That's just fandom how much of it is bad? The bad is really bad. Like, you ask parents of players about the bad, they will tell you stories of the bad for days. But what percentage is that of their experience? And maybe it's a larger percentage of the feedback that they seek, or not even seek, because it's the comment card thing, where how many comments do you leave that are good at a restaurant? You leave the bad ones, you leave the bad reviews. And it's the same thing with social media on feedback to players. You leave the bad reviews, you don't leave the good reviews. Marvin Harrison makes an incredible catch where he somehow contorts his body to get a toe in. Nobody adds him and says great job. But if he gets knocked out of a game because he gets concussed and is targeted, you probably have like 150 people telling him, get back in the game, you're weaker. Now, obviously that didn't happen, but you have it's the negative that will result in the higher numbers. And I can go on a rant about the entire media world, the news media. It's the more negative you can put out there, the better the ratings. And I'll just end there so that we don't skew too far off. But it's the negative feedback is always going to outnumber the positive feedback. That's why I consider, for all of the people watching this, and only a fraction have hit the thumbs up, the rest are being negative. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it goes back to the old, if it bleeds, it leads. And when I worked in television, WSVN in Miami was one of the biggest culprits of that. If it bleeds, it leads. And, bad news and everything else. And I mean, even in running a website, 12-0 or 0-12 are the times that you have the most activity. Either everything has to be going right or everything has to be going wrong, because 6-6 creates indifference and apathy. And, suddenly we're not going to turn this into a basketball show, but I think that's kind of where the Ohio State basketball program is to a certain extent. There's just, apathy is growing because people are dissatisfied. I mean, the team isn't bad enough for there to be wholesale changes made at this point, but they're certainly underperforming compared to the lofty expectations that people have that basketball should mimic what football is doing. But I have been on message board communities throughout the entire college football universe back again when I was working in the other network, and this is not something unique to Ohio State. And there are certain fan bases I just won't even take on Twitter because Tennessee, there are just ones that are just too difficult to deal with and who will not leave you alone. And Tennessee. So I don't think it's something that's unique to Ohio State, but since we're all in the midst of it, the four of us are talking about Ohio State here on the show, and everybody who's part of watching the show either cares about Ohio State in a positive or maybe in a negative way, as I've seen Michael Campbell's in here, who is a big Notre Dame guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We notice it. But it does get tiring. And sometimes as somebody tasked with having to moderate a message board, and you kind of get the same repeated ball peen hammer attacks to the side of your head, right on the temple of the same, pardon my French, the same shit every day. But it is what it is. I mean, and we signed up for it. I don't know where, but we signed up for this.
Looks like Steve's staying silent there. We'll move on.
Yeah, I've lived with this for over 25 years. Just, we used to get, when I worked at Buckeye Sports Bulletin, the weekly newspaper, we would print the letters to the editor. Me and I am just struggling today, which was the predecessor to the message boards, and everybody would be negative about John Cooper, and then we go over and talk to John Cooper, and he goes, "You print those negative letters to the editor, you're too dang negative. You're too dang negative. You got Buckeye in your title. You're too negative." Like it was hurting his recruiting that Jim from Jacksonville was mad, that they lost to Michigan for the umpteenth year in a row. So yeah, it was a different time, that's for sure. But the same people are out there. That is definitely the case.
But Steve, to that whole thing, like, was it Gary Gherkin?
Yes, Davenport, Iowa
was a guy, and he's famous among those of us who would read Buckeye Sports Bulletin, or it was the predecessor. He would write letters to the editor, and then you'd read them and be so angry because he's ripping on your Buckeyes, like he's got some issues, and you're like, this guy, and he becomes like this niche legend basically. But that was the predecessor to message boards. It was letters to the editor. And Steve, also being at BSB, you guys had to answer phones from people.
From Gary Gherkin, that guy would call in from Davenport, Iowa, and "Can I talk to Steve?" And he would tell me about, "I played offensive line in the war on a football team during World War II." And now this was back in 1995. I'm talking to him on the telephone about something that he did back in the 1940s. So yeah, it was really something. I got to tell you, he was an actual people thought it was all put on, that we sat there around the office and we wrote those letters to ourselves, but that was not the case. It was I would get a handwritten letter from him about once or twice a month, and if things weren't going well, maybe even more often than that. But yeah, it was always about the offensive line. The offensive line is where it always began, and it's still, even 30 years later or however many years later, that's still the case.
Yeah, R.I.P. Gary Gherkin passed away a couple of years ago.
Yep, he did.
Easy Dinero is pointing out James Laurinaitis, who, of course, as I believe a 3-star out of Minnesota, made himself one of the best linebackers in the country and was known as a tremendous technician, developed his skills, and obviously turned that into a very solid pro career with the St. Louis Rams. And then we've heard it communicated on the Big Ten Network, and now he's working for Marcus Freeman. So should Ryan Day go out there and grab James Laurinaitis to coach the linebackers?
Well, right now there's not a spot available with the coaching staff, so that may create a holdup. Still waiting to hear about the NCAA okaying all of the increased coaching positions, but I do think this makes sense for both parties and is something that will eventually come to fruition.
Well, he's tight with Marcus Freeman, so trying to get Marcus off the ground there at Notre Dame the right way. So maybe that runs its course after a few years and James wants to come back to Columbus and work at his alma mater. It would make sense, I would think, at some point. I don't think it's going to happen next week or anything like that, but perhaps down the line. I mean, Jim Knowles, I don't know how long he's going to be at Ohio State. And if they do expand the staff, then he can just be the coordinator and somebody else can coach the linebackers, perhaps, would be the direction it goes. But, yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. I think his loyalty right now is with one of his best friends, Marcus, in helping him get Notre Dame back in the top 10 and, trying to win big at Notre Dame right now. But I would agree with Tony. I would think the over-under on that happening is yes at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that is much more likely that when Ohio State travels to South Bend, that James Laurinaitis will be wearing scarlet and gray rather than whatever, gold and some sort of green, blue. I don't know. I'm colorblind. I don't know. It's going to happen, in my opinion. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No, there's no room at the end, and I'm not here to sit there and speculate on how the staff is going to be reshaped or anything like that, but it makes too much sense, and there's just a lot of smoke to the rumor right now, and it's something that is not. I mean, I know has picked up some steam here this week, but it's not a new rumor. It is something that has been percolating for a while. Certainly, something that has been talked about over, on our website. I'm sure probably on Steve's website. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it. So, yeah, I think that there's a very strong chance that it does happen. I think that being able to move Jim Knowles truly into all right, you are now the head coach of the defense. I mean, that is what we already talked about. You have no positional responsibilities. We got this guy at the DL, this guy at linebacker. We're handling the secondary this way. You focus on trying to get 5 explosive plays down to no explosive plays and everything else, and are able to rotate more between positions and everything else. I think that is the logical next step, and the step that Ohio State absolutely needs to do in order to move forward and try to get over that hump that has been in its way too many promising seasons.
Well, and remember, Ohio State has lost Coy McFarland, who was the grad assistant who came over with Knowles from Oklahoma State, where he was basically the linebackers coach because Knowles was the defensive coordinator. And so he coached linebackers this past year for the Buckeyes as well. So now you need to replace him. And I don't know that you can do that with a grad assistant again. And I don't know that James Laurinaitis would go from grad assistant to grad assistant. And so like that position may need to be a full-time position, but right now they don't have an opening. So you have to make an opening. And so I think there's still some things to be worked out, obviously, but that's a position that needs to be filled. There needs to be a full-time, and I say full-time linebackers coach for when Jim Knowles is doing other things, just like they had last year with Coy McFarland.
Sue was asking about Jaheim Singletary, of course. So one-time Buckeye commit, signed with Georgia, basically sat through a national championship season, and now is in the transfer portal. And whether Ohio State burned that bridge or they are pursuing Jaheim Singletary.
I'll jump in on that one quickly. Love you, Sue, but Ohio did not suddenly get closer to home. Ohio was deemed to be too far away from home when he decommitted and ended up going to Georgia. Look for him to stay within the state of Florida. Even if you look at the distance from Miami to Jacksonville and try and plot it out on a map, and I'm not saying he's going to Miami, but it's not that they burn the bridge per se. I mean, sometimes when a kid decommits, it does fall apart a little bit. Not the fault of anybody. It just happens. But no, there's no real connection going back towards Singletary.
Because he can't handle the weather? Is that what you're saying, Kevin?
I didn't say that. You've been to Jacksonville. Jacksonville is more Georgia than it is Florida in terms of weather. It is not, I'm moving to Florida. Where? Jacksonville. You're not moving to Florida.
Jacksonville's more Ohio than Florida.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and Darren Graham here saying that the Ohio State's a victim of their own previous success. I think that's what building a program is, and having expectations. And when you have a program like Ohio State, as I've said before, that started with 1950, Woody Hayes takes over, becomes a Hall of Fame head coach, gives way to Earl Bruce, who's a Hall of Fame head coach, gives way to John Cooper, who's a Hall of Fame head coach, gives way to Jim Tressel, Hall of Fame head coach, gives way to Luke Fickell for a year, who looks like he's on his way to being a Hall of Fame head coach, then Urban Meyer, then Ryan Day. Like, what else should be expected? Like, this is, granted, no national championships don't happen every year, but competing for them do. But I do think there's a segment of the spoiled, you get spoiled. And I think you saw that with the Michigan game. And I think the players get spoiled with it as well. It becomes an expectation. And the problem is, when it becomes an expectation for the players, it's definitely an expectation for the fans. And when the players don't come through with that, then fans are very upset, and then it's up to the players to get them back in the winning ways. But victim. I mean, the best thing that you could have, I guess, is being a victim of your own success, because it implies there's been success there.
I produced a video a couple of years ago. I went through all the elite programs or the have been elite programs, i.e. Miami, Florida State. And I defined, because these terms get thrown around by people all the time, who's relevant, elite, all these terms. So I defined it in regards to what I considered being down. When's the last time this program's been down? They've been down. And basically, the last time Ohio State's been down is that Earl Bruce bridge to John Cooper, 1987 to about, depending on, since Cooper kind of elevated
92.
it slightly through 7 and 8 win seasons. So, but even during that down 87 to 92 period, Ohio State was playing for a Big Ten championship on the final day of the season against Michigan in 89 and in 90, and would have been playing either in a Rose Bowl or a major New Year's Day game as the Big Ten champion or co-champion for 2 of those years. So I actually had to even go past my criteria, because I said, if you're competing for late in the season, competing for a conference championship, how are you down? And even Ohio State's down period, they're competing for conference championships 2 out of 5 years.
I'm so glad that was during my undergrad years, that I was there for 89 and 90, and, you know, talked to all these kids who were like, yeah, I don't really know what it's like to lose a lot of games. I'm like, well, let me tell you what it is. You know, being up there for the USC game, the Cooper is a quitter game where with the Lightning and everything else, and somehow losing to Lou Tepper. I mean, how the hell do you lose to Lou Tepper? I mean, he couldn't beat Illinois. I didn't understand that. And John Cooper is a great guy. I've had the opportunity to talk to him since he got out of coaching. This isn't an anti-John Cooper thing, but, you know, when I was able to wear the fan hat, and as somebody pointed out, fan is short for fanatic. Yeah, I went through a lot of lean years in terms of football. Obviously, I haven't been through lean years in terms of food, but lean years in terms of football, and it was something.
I remember my freshman year of '94 thinking, like, could this be the year Ohio State beats Illinois? Man, wouldn't that be amazing if Ohio State could beat Illinois?
Good Lord.
But Illinois was good back then.
Yeah, they lost as many games in 1 year as a lot of these kids see in 4 years now at Ohio State. So, yeah, it was a different time, that's for sure.
Illinois was good, but they weren't that good.
You know? Ohio State had no business losing to them on the frequency that they were losing. I mean, yes, Illinois had some dudes. You go through those rosters, and they had some dudes, but
yeah, sure. There was Jeff George, Simeon Rice, et cetera, Howard Griffith, whoever else you want to throw in there, but at various times. But yeah, those Illinois teams were not finishing in the top 10 in the country. Not that this Notre Dame game needed to have any more juice to it, but Sam Hartman coming to town certainly should put Jim Knowles on alert. And I know it's game 4. It's not game 1 this year. So there's going to be some testing of the defense and some trial and error. And he should have 3 cupcakes to be able to test some theories, or test his theory, I guess, if he's going to be that adamant about the way they're going to play defense next year again. But just your thoughts about Sam Hartman. This guy, there's not a whole lot of guys that walk around throwing 35 to 50 touchdown passes per year, and he's done it now for 3 years.
What team is that?
Notre Dame.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm not going to say that Sam Hartman isn't. I mean, he was great at Wake, and going against, you know, a couple good teams and some bad teams and everything else. But I don't know. First of all, the running backs are going for 260. I know Michael just sits there and lives for trolling and emojis. I mean, those are the things that Michael Campbell is all about right there, and he's getting a reaction out of people. And you know, I really shouldn't feed the beast there, but didn't we hear all this going into the last Notre Dame game? And then didn't Michael Campbell get to be very scarce for a while after Ohio State really just handled Notre Dame? I mean, I'm not going to come out and say that 21-10 was like, you know, 63-7 or anything like that, but Ohio State, especially in the second half, thoroughly handled Notre Dame. They're going to have a big upgrade in Sam Hartman compared to what they had at quarterback this year. Who's he throwing it to? I mean, he doesn't have Michael Mayer anymore. They better be able to run for 260 because I'm not convinced that they have. I mean, I haven't followed what they've done in the portal outside of that, but it's awfully early to be starting this crap.
Well, isn't this just, I think what he has done is he has taken what he wrote last year about Tyler Buckner and just replaced it with Sam Hartman. I'm pretty sure we got this exact same comment and how Tyler Buckner was going to light everybody up. And that was also, I think Notre Dame had the number 1 recruiting class at that point as well. And I'm pretty sure Notre Dame still finished with the number 1. No, they didn't. Oh, so a lot of the bluster is just bluster perhaps. But again, without bluster, we're just left with talking amongst ourselves. I can't wait for that game. It's going to be my first time there at Notre Dame. So I am definitely looking forward to that one. I think Ohio State is very happy that they have 3 games to prepare for, to play before that one and, get some of the rust. Not that I don't know that Notre Dame I know they don't have the talent that Ohio State does, but as we've seen, it takes more than talent. Sometimes that home field advantage is it's a great way to equalize the talent.
Yeah. Nobody under the age of 95 can say they've attended an Ohio State Notre Dame game where Notre Dame won. So, I guess that's a bridge that will be crossed one day. I'm sure there'll be a new generation of people who will witness that. I'm not sure it's going to happen this September, though. Ohio State's going to have a powerhouse team. And, particularly if the quarterback checks out and the offensive line checks out, they're going to be 11, 12, 13 wins again. I don't have any doubt about that.
Kevin brought up our status as Ohio State fans or students at a particular time in life. And 1935 and 36 was stuck in my head for a long time because when is Ohio State going to play Notre Dame? Because they're 0-2 in this series and they never play Notre Dame. And I know when that series was signed in like 1988, 89, it was like, ugh. This doesn't look like a good matchup. Notre Dame was on top of the world and the Buckeyes were scuffling, but it obviously worked out in 1995 and 96.
It worked out.
And has ever since. All right. These are 3 of the best. We appreciate them being here each and every week. We don't know if we're going to be here Wednesday, Thursday, whenever it is. We got to coordinate 4 schedules. That's why it's important for everyone out there to please subscribe to the Voice of College Football here on the Ohio State channel. And hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. We get word out as soon as possible. It's typically Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, but we want to make sure, of course, that you also can find these 3. So, Steve, bucknuts.com, of course, on 247 Sports, and anything else going on this week?
No, just trying to stay warm up here. Spitting snow and rain again today here in Columbus, and Kevin and I had the good fortune to go to Illinois on Tuesday, and we're gluttons for punishment. We're headed to Indiana on Saturday, and that reminds me, I need to get a reservation. You're bowing out of that one?
I'm bowing out. I'm out.
You're out. He's pulled the ripcord on it. I need to get a reservation at Zagreb's in Bloomington, and we'll see about that.
Kevin.
Yeah, I thought I expressed that in the car on the way back as Steve expertly drove us back from a much snowier Illinois than it was in Ohio. It was pretty gross in Illinois. Anybody who gets to spend any time in Bloomington, Janko's Little Zagreb is fantastic. Great steak. And it's not St. Elmo in the way that it looks, but I'll put them right there. It's a fantastic steak. But I have to pick my wife up at the airport on Saturday, and that'll just make home life a lot easier than being like, sorry, take an Uber. I'm going to be in Bloomington to go watch hoops. But to make a long story long, you can catch me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. Of course, you can catch me over at BuckeyeHuddle.com, as well as the Big Meat Kickoff podcast. At this point, as we said at the beginning of the show, should be doing something on my way too early top 25 poll that came out a week ago or so. And looking forward to getting the opportunity to speak to the early enrollees here. We've always got something to talk about in terms of football, so be sure to give me a follow and check out all of my work.
Tony.
Yeah, you can find me at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well, and podcast is Buckeye Weekly on all of your podcast platforms of choice. Just today, dropped a piece on Hero Kanu, a story there that you can read on BuckeyeHuddle.com. Probably going to drop another one today, talking about how Ohio State's going to replace Zach Harrison and the options there. I saw Sue talking about Jack Sawyer, so there'll be some Jack Sawyer in there in that story as well.
Next Wednesday is National Signing Day. Follow these three gentlemen with their coverage of Ohio State's National Signing Day. I, of course, will be here on the main channel covering all sorts of signing day news across the country. But in regards to all of us getting together, most likely that's going to be next Thursday after National Signing Day. For Steve, for Kevin, for Tony, we appreciate you all being here. Bring a friend or two next Thursday to Ohio State Live, and we'll see you then.